2019 Rugby World Cup is reaching its business end, and we have one round of pool fixtures remaining before the quarterfinals. South Africa were too strong for Italy on Friday, and they're expected to be pretty comfortable against Canada on Tuesday as well. And that dream quarterfinal against Japan is now very much on the cards. I'm joined in studio once again by Rob Houwing. Morning, Rob.
Hello, Lloyd.
Just your thoughts on Italy. I mean, like I say, pretty comfortable. The red card for the Italians didn't help the game. But what did you make of the performance from a South African point of view?
Very decent indeed. I thought the fact that they sort of kept up a high tempo pretty much from start to finish. Very early statement of intent. The forwards really got stuck in to confirm that they are possibly the premier, is certainly from a depth point of view, the best forward sort of arsenal at the World Cup, although that's arguable, but I think really quality bunch of players in there. And they kept up the intensity pretty much for the whole game. You may remember that in the previous game against Namibia, there was a little bit of a tailing off in the last quarter. Here they actually scored quite a hatful of tries in roughly that last 20 minutes or so, which kind of indicated that their sort of preparedness to put right any little shortcomings from the previous game, and it was never really in any doubt. I never feared hugely for this game. You could see that the Italians were a pretty limited outfit, and so lots of ticks for the Springboks. I think they're in a good space going forward.
We don't want to linger on that too much because it's a quick turnaround, and Canada is up next on Tuesday. 13 changes again, a new side for that match. Not a hell of a lot to achieve either, because you would expect them to win and qualify second, as we say. So what do you think there is to get out of that match for South Africa?
Look, increasingly there are players, there's such a healthy competition in the squad that the dirt trackers, if we can call them that, they know that they've got a job on their hands to fight into the side, but they also know that they can. They will know that Rassie Erasmus is rewarding good form. We've seen someone like Lloyd Burnard, Bongi and Bonambi eclipse certain sort of players who had been preferred to them. I'm talking Franco Mostert, Malcolm Marx, for instance, and getting ahead of them in the pecking order just by a fraction. So nobody can rest on their laurels, and I don't think anybody will come the Canada game either. Lots of changes, but again, utterly consistent. We knew from the outset of the tournament, Rassie did say as much, that I intend to have the first team for certain matches and the reserve guys for other ones, and it's worked really well so far. So no major surprises. The only slight fear that I have, or perhaps fear is not even the right word, because I don't really have any fears about the Canada game, but if there is one, it's just that there are quite a few players who are being fielded a little bit out of their regular sort of comfort zones. I'm thinking, Warwick Galant moving to wing, and Damian moving to outside centre, and so on. So a few guys in slightly unfamiliar sort of areas, but they're all good enough to be able to do the job very comfortably against Canada.
You speak about Damian Delende, and obviously Rassie's hand has been forced a bit there. He looks to be now the backup 13 to Lukhanyo Am should something go wrong. Is there anyone else in the squad who can do that job should Rassie need to find an emergency 13 down the line?
Look, I was a little surprised that against Canada that he didn't just slot someone like Damian Willemse, who is very versatile and is such a gifted footballer. I would have no fears about playing him in the 13 channel. I thought perhaps that would happen. He'd be a great guy to have running off a 12, a 12 who sort of can set him up, put him into gaps, etc. But that didn't happen. He went for Damian instead, which was interesting because it does suggest that perhaps, as you say, if there is an issue, perhaps you have your Frans Steyn moving into Damian's position at 12 in the first team, and Delende moving to 13. What we also know is that both Steyn and Delende are versatile between the two centre berths. Frans Steyn has played at 13. He's also not an ideal guy for 13 because he hasn't got explosive pace, especially these days as he's got a little bit older. But he did play a little bit there in the Jean de Villiers days when Heineke Meyer used to wrestle with the whole dynamic of where do I field Jean, and him. And Delende also has had spells at 13 when Jean de Villiers was around. So they are capable of, it's not sort of foreign turf for them, which is not a bad thing. So it looks like that's the way we're going. Lukhanyo Am was certainly deserved a break. He's played all three, he started all three matches so far, so I don't think he was ever going to start a fourth with a 4-day turnaround against Canada. He gets a well-merited break, but you know what, we do need him to stay fit because he is as you say, the only specialist 13, so he's a vital element going forward, but at the moment Rassie of course is now having a little sort of mini examination of his other resources in that that quite important channel.
Rassie, I remember him saying pretty much throughout 2018, which was his first year in charge, that Damian Willemse had been identified as what he wanted to be the backup 15 at the tournament. Obviously, injuries that came after that meant that he was ruled out of the squad. But he's now there, and he has the 15 jersey for the weekend. Is this an opportunity where some people are suggesting that Willy's just struggling and not quite at his best? He's a difficult guy to analyse, Willy, because he does so much good as well. Yeah. But is this an opportunity for a guy like Damian Willemse to put his hand up for that 15 jersey moving forward, or do you think Rassie's pretty much settled on Willy?
I still think that he will stick with Willy. I think, Rassie does tend to show quite protracted faith in people. I thought there was a slight improvement in Willy Leroux's consistency, if you like. He always does a few little brilliant things during a game. There are some people who just sort of almost instinctively don't like him. They're nervous about him because of the sort of mercurial sort of player that he is, but he will always do some brilliant things during a game, and I thought he did more that was brilliant than was bad against Italy. So he's getting there. He is building up a little bit, but it is interesting that Willemse comes straight into the picture at 15. We do know that outside of fly half, fullback is probably his next most obvious position. I think his only box start so far was at fullback against England at Twickenham, where I thought he actually came through pretty well. So it is an exciting opportunity, and the thought of Damian Willemse and Cheslin Colby in a Springbok back three going forward is quite an exciting one. I think it'll happen sometime in the future anyway. Whether at this World Cup remains to be seen. I'm not quite sure. I still think that Willy's experience will give him a slight edge in that department. But this is an opportunity for Damian Willemse to sort of dazzle in what could be a high-scoring game. He'll enjoy that. He'll enjoy the Boks, hopefully throwing the ball around a little bit, running through hopefully lots of space. So it is a great opportunity for him to really sort of push hard at that, knocking at that mainline number 15 door.
Rob, just on the Eben Etzebeth story, I mean, I'm sure it's one that SA Rugby and the Springbok management would like to go away as quickly as possible. It isn't, and if anything, it's gathering momentum. At what point will SA Rugby be forced into taking internal action?
Look, it is looking increasingly feasible. SA Rugby, as we know, are now going through this with an even finer tooth comb. There is an investigation going on by them just to establish what really happened in Langebaan. It is a PR disaster for SA Rugby. It's not what they need. It's not what South African sport needs. When you have a World Cup, you have the eyes of the planet focused on all the different countries, and everyone's always looking for flashpoints. South Africa's opponents, will perhaps, in a slightly devious kind of way, be seeing these issues as distractions. And because the Boks are considered right up there as potential, title winners or finalists or whatever, it is the sort of thing that could almost sort of, fly in the face a little bit of the Springboks. And I think they'll all be acutely aware of that. There is a certain level of embarrassment involved. I'm still a little bit in two minds myself. We're still awaiting the really concrete evidence on what did Eben Etzebeth himself specifically do, that sort of fateful, or should we say ill-advised night on the tiles out in Langebaan. We've heard stories that he arrived drunk at a nightclub. He won't be the first person in history to arrive drunk at a nightclub. I don't think there's any special law against that. We've also heard stories that there's this wolf pack of his friends who get involved in, to put it politely, sort of argy-bargy in watering holes and so on. But then you also hear that Eben Etzebeth sort of would stand there with his arms folded, watching it all happen. Again, does that amount to a criminal offence? The racial slur, of course, is the big hot potato. What really happened? Were slurs exchanged? Did he, was he guilty of that? Because we know that the consequences for that are going to be, far-reaching, if you like, than any of these sort of, broken bottles in the bar sort of thing. So it is becoming more and more of a hot potato. And SA Rugby must be sort of walking on eggshells at the moment, wondering which way to go. But yes, the possibility mounts all the time of Etzebeth coming home. I see he's on the bench again for the Canada game. So with every game that goes by, you wonder, is this going to be his swan song at the tournament, or is he perhaps going to have to come back and face some questions or charges even, and then potentially even return to the World Cup? Would that be an option? We don't know. It's all a little bit up in the air, but it is providing plenty of embarrassment, sort of politically, if you like, for SA Rugby. There's no question of that.
So, Rob, just going back to that match day 23 for the Canada game, what was interesting to me is that Bongi and Bonambi's been left out of the squad entirely, which suggests to me that Rassie's protecting him for games down the line. Does that tell you that he's now moved ahead of Malcolm Marx in the pecking order for the number 2 jersey?
I think so. I've been advocating it. Some people, especially sort of up north, have been suggesting that I've got a sort of anti-Marx agenda. Most certainly not. I think he's a fantastic player. We've seen him, really announce himself 2016, 2017, SA Rugby Player of the Year, a class act, a real fear factor forward, and he'll be back. Make no mistake. He's going to keep knocking at that door. Far too good to be sort of considered now a sort of permanent reserve. But at the same time, Bongi and Bonambi's work rate has been quite extraordinary this season. There's just such a fire in that belly. Slightly different sort of player to Malcolm Marx. Not quite as naturally physical, although plenty physical, if you know what I'm saying. But his work rate has been extraordinary. He's tidied up his line-out throwing act, which we always thought was a little bit of a weak point. Not always the strongest area of Malcolm Marx's play either. But Bongi's line-out efficiency has improved dramatically. His mobility around the park, just that engine just cannot stop. He was fantastic again against Italy. I gave him an 8 out of 10, one of the premier Boks performers in the pack. And he's just a master at managing that rolling maul, which the Boks do so effectively. And of course, he's increasingly becoming almost like a football striker in terms of his try strike rate on the base of those rolling mauls is becoming quite staggering. A real sort of extra prong to the Springbok attack.
South Africa held its collective breath during that Italy game when Cheslin Colby limped off with a little ankle niggle. As it turns out, everything's fine and he'll be okay. But the fact that everyone was that worried shows you how important a player he's become for this team.
Absolutely massive. I mean, it's extraordinary that he delivered, again, such a massive performance, possibly his best yet. We keep saying with every performance that he plays, was that his best yet for the Springboks? He just keeps on going to another level. Somebody said to me, why didn't you give him a 10 out of 10? I gave him a 9 for my sins. But I had to say, look, one doesn't hand out sort of 10s that regularly, just as I tend not to hand out 1s, over emotionally either. There's always the tiny little gremlins that do creep into games, but he was absolutely terrific. He's one of the players of the tournament so far. There's no question of that. No reason why that's not going to continue. He manages to manufacture tries from the most claustrophobic of space, as we saw early on in the game against Italy. Then, he was back winning high balls against, a brutal forward like Sergio Parise, beating him in a 50-50. That just shows you how much ticker he's got to go with the vast array of talent. And yes, that late injury did have everyone in South Africa holding their breath, but thank goodness it looks as though he's going to be okay. No role at all against Canada, which will be a relief to everybody. There was no question, I think, with a 4-day turnaround that he simply had to sit out. He would have been due a break anyway. I don't think there's any possibility that he would have been remotely near the match day 23. So now all just hold fingers that he does recover fully. He's got almost a 2-week turnaround to do so. So hopefully Mr. Colby back at his post, because he really is the talk of the town in Japan, no question.
The England-Argentina game this weekend was ruined early by a red card, and that red card means that this tournament has seen more red cards than any other World Cup before it. I think it's 5 in total now. Is that just a case of, we had the whole keep rugby safe, clean up rugby over the weekend, trying to keep the sport as safe as possible? Is this just an example of referees just being incredibly strict when it comes to anything near the head? And do you expect to see more red cards down the line?
I think there will be. I think the onus is on coaches and the players to have the gumption to realise that World Rugby, isn't joking about the high challenge, the stiff arm or the shoulder to the chin sort of thing. Those are dangerous challenges in an increasingly violent physical brand of rugby that we have in the modern age. Where everything is so much is dictated by the collisional aspect rather than in the old days with sort of silky avoidance and sidestepping and so on and basic tackles. Now it's all about winning the collisions, as they say, and so inevitably you're going to have flashpoints like that. The trouble is, of course, a red card really does ruin a good game. I thought the England-Argentina game was looking like quite a feisty contest. The Argentinians were right up for it. They were desperate, and that makes them dangerous. And that, the game was very much in the balance in that first quarter. And then, Lavanini, of course, gets pinged. I thought rightfully. I thought perhaps there was, he is a big guy, and perhaps a little bit of a misjudgment. Farrell was sort of, was sort of shifting as he made the hit. But the more you looked at it, the more it did look as though there was some malice involved and that it did meet the sort of threshold for red. The sad thing was, of course, that we then knew that it was going to be one-way traffic. And Lavanini perhaps is the sort of guy who is a little bit hit by his heritage. He is a serial offender for foul play. And the Pumas must sometimes want to pull their hair out with a guy like that. You obviously want to have a sort of a meanie like that in your front five. And he can be a really good player. But he may have been partly a victim of his heritage. It's just one of those things.
Is there a danger that players are starting to look for penalties when they might not be there? We see guys putting up and unders and getting hit slightly late and dropping like they've been shot. We see guys maybe going into contact, just getting as low as they possibly can to try and draw a high tackle out of a defender. Is this a worry for the game moving forward? I mean, the last thing rugby lovers would want is for the sport to start resembling football, where there's simulation and guys looking for free kicks and penalties.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that's the old soccer is notorious, if you like, for the sort of the Oscar when it comes to sort of falling over when you haven't actually even been tackled, writhing in pain, and then within seconds, back on the feet and smiling. You don't really want to see that in rugby. Rugby's always had a little bit more of a sort of a culture of sort of honesty and sort of a kind of a sort of a behavioural gravitas, if you like, that is now a little bit under threat, because obviously players are going to try to affect referees' minds. Referees are under increasing pressure to make these kind of really 50-50 calls around especially sort of high tackles, challenges in the air, dangerous dumpings of players when they have received the ball, etc. So while I'm very happy that they are clamping down on any aspect that can endanger a player's physical health permanently, perhaps, with neck and head injuries and so on. There is a balance to be struck. You do have to guard against too much of a sort of a theatrical element, and if that starts to creep in, perhaps you've got to get a bit heavier, in sort of censoring the players who are prone to milking situations. I would agree, yes.
And just finally, Rob, a word on the tournament hosts, Japan. I mean, they've done it again. Good bonus point win over Samoa, and that bonus point could become important as that pool winds down in terms of their run at the quarterfinals. But they've shown again that they're the real deal, and that it's not just, that the win over Japan wasn't a fluke at all. And shown that they're more than just a speedy team. I mean, their set players are improving. Their hits defensively are good. I mean, they really are looking increasingly like the complete package.
They are indeed. They've enlivened the tournament. It's fantastic that the host nation are doing so well. I don't think most of us would have predicted them to be at the races to the extent that they are at this advanced stage of the tournament. As we know, that last day game against Scotland is going to be enormous. Scotland obviously still scrapping for a possible quarter-final berth. We know that just a basic win for Japan, never mind bonus point or anything, assures them of top place, which then will get quite a lot of South Africans, punching the air, I think, because I still believe, despite some reservations from some people, that we would rather face Japan than Ireland. Let's not forget that we beat Japan 41-7 when both teams were going hammer and tongs, just on the eve of the World Cup, which, that's still quite a big psychological thing in South Africa's favour. We've kind of buried Brighton now, so I would still, make no mistake, I would still far prefer to play Japan, with the greatest of respect to clearly a very dangerous emerging side with a fantastic team ethic, great conditioning, and some real talent and crowd-pleasing players within their ranks. But I'd still be very happy if South Africa played Japan in a quarter-final.